Hey, Becky. Well, there are scenes of panic and pandemonium at Kabul airport today as desperate people pour onto the runway trying to flee the country in what can only be described as a chaotic exodus. Now, people are literally clinging on to U.S. military aircrafts as they try to take off. The U.S. is in charge of the airport there, but their focus is on the evacuation of American personnel. As far as commercial flights go, it's a disorderly mess with little security, and the commercial flights are currently not running. We know that as of last night, the U.S. military had flown around 500 embassy personnel out of the country on military aircraft. They're working up to a capacity of several thousand out per day, but they won't have that capability for a few days to come. As for the Afghans that have worked in various roles for the U.S., it's going to be a much tougher journey to get out of the country. As I mentioned, commercial flights are problematic. Thousands of Afghans are stranded at the airport with their suitcases and whatever other belongings they could muster together. And just getting to the airport, Becky, from far-flung locations in Afghanistan means having to run a very dangerous gauntlet that could cost them their lives. There are also reports that NBC News can't confirm that 5 people have been killed at the airport. It's unclear under what circumstances. It could have been gunfire, it could have been a stampede, but it's so chaotic there. The details are only dripping out as the day unfolds.
Ali, we have watched that video of the Afghan citizens kind of surrounding the military transport plane and trying to grasp onto the sides of it. We've watched that again and again this morning. And I just wonder what happened. Do you know what the end result was? The plane can't take off like this. Did they pull it aside?
No, one of the planes actually took off, and there was also some very disturbing video that's emerged of people falling out of the wheel hub of the airplane after it had taken off. But most of the planes were grounded because they simply couldn't take off because there was a stampede of people on the runway, literally, as the video showed, clinging onto the plane. So a lot of them had to be grounded, and then the U.S. Army then had to form a perimeter around the runway to stop people pouring onto the runway, and they had to fire warning shots in the air to disperse people. So it's a real mess there, and you can see that the Afghan people, who are obviously not supporters of the Taliban, are desperate to find a way out of that country, even resorting to clinging on to wheels of airplanes.
You mentioned how dangerous it is even to try and make the run to get out. And I guess that if you look like you are trying to get away, then obviously you're not a supporter, and that puts you at incredible risk.
Exactly. And you see, one of the problems there, Becky, is that the U.S. had said to Afghans that had been helping U.S. personnel and had granted them visas, they said, look, come down to Kabul airport and we'll evacuate you. The problem with that is a lot of these Afghans were in far-flung parts of the country. It's a vast country. They didn't have any money 2 weeks ago to get a commercial flight from some corner of the country to Kabul to get evacuated. And they just simply couldn't go by roads with their families because it was too dangerous. If the Taliban caught them, at best they would be detained, and at worst they would be killed. So it was this really dangerous gauntlet that they had to run through the country, which many of them were unable to do and are now in hiding, totally unaware of what the future holds for them, as the Taliban has now totally overrun the country.